Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Force of Chaos against the Force of the Dark Elves, or more accurately, the Forces of the Thousand Maws. And this is a matchup that is kind of difficult for Chaos, and I'm honestly not the best of Chaos players, and not necessarily the most experienced, but I do know one of the things that makes this matchup an absolute mess for Chaos is this unit right here, this ugly little chariot, the Scourge Runner. And this little pain in the rear is very hard for Chaos to deal with. Why? Well, look at that stat line. Look at its stats. 150 range means it outranges literally everything except a Hell Cannon on the Chaos roster. 84 speed means it outruns almost everything. And what it can't outrun, it can outfight in melee. Or, if need be, it can kind of kite away from horsemen and the like and shoot them down over time. Otherwise, of course, it does have anti-large, making it very potent against the majority of Chaos Lords. It can run over your Marauders, and just in case that was enough, 80 armor and only 3 models means it's very hard to bleed the models on this unit. And that means its DPS, while perhaps not looking as that impressive on paper, is basically going to be constant every game. You're not really going to lose Scourge Runner models most of the time. So with this build here, I really wanted to be mindful of that and build around it. Going over the comp here, you can see I'm bringing Kolek as my Lord here. Might seem like an odd choice in light of Scourge Runners and the plethora of AP missiles the Dark Elves can bring to the table, but Kolek is something that gives you tools to deal with Dark Elf large. And I honestly don't have too many tools here otherwise to deal with it, so I figured Kolek would be a good way to go bonk and beat the crap out of, say, Malekith on a dragon, Marathi if she tries to duel you, some Cold One Knights, that sort of thing. Kolek will beat the crap out of him. He does get standard die, of course. He's got Slaughter the Storm here to zap some annoying blobs of Dark Elf infantry, and Foe Seeker just to give him a little more mobility. And he's not entirely vulnerable. He does have 95 armor, he's got 6400 HP, and perhaps most importantly for this, 25% missile resist, which means Scourge Runners, while certainly potent against Kolek, are not going to end him that quickly. The mix of HP and missile resist does definitely help there. Alongside him, we do have a Shadowcaster. He's coming in with Penumbral Pendulum to wreck enemy formations. We've got Enfeebling Foe to weaken key targets, and then Melkoth's Miasma to potentially help snare an enemy skirmish unit or whittle down key targets like, say, Blackguard or something if we saw those. Smoke and Mirrors I actually figured could be decent here if I need to get my Marauder Horsemen or Horsemasters into melee. And he does actually have evasion. Get his melee stats up a tiny bit. Nothing too impressive, but, you know, make him a little bit more effective. Of course, the Chaos Sorcerer isn't a pushover in melee. Like, he will outfight, say, a Dark Elf Sorceress pretty handily, and 90 armor means he can tank quite a bit of pressure. Exalted Hero here as well. This might seem like an odd pick, but at 800 gold on horseback, he is not a bad character. He can lay the smackdown on key squishy targets. If you see Marathi, for example, he can beat the snot out of her. If you happen to catch Sorceress or a Sorcerer or a Supreme Sorceress, he can smack her down too. Manticores, that sort of thing, you can beat him down pretty well. And a decent, fairly survivable hero that can disrupt backlines too. Besides that, front line here, mix of Mirror Guard as well as Chaos Marauders, just there to rush down my opponent as quickly as possible. The Regiment of Renown, I almost called them Rat Ogres there. Summoners of Rage, they would probably not appreciate being compared to Rat Ogres, but Regiment of Renown Dragon Ogres, of course, with their Chain Lightning and magic damage in there as well to give us some extra anti-large. It's not just Kolek. And then a mix of Marauder Horsemen and Horsemasters out on the periphery to help counteract the Dark Elf skirmishing. And boy, oh boy, do we have skirmish play. 2 units of Dark Riders with Rapier Crossbows are in here in the mix, as well as Scourge Runners over here. And a second unit of Scourge Runners back here. So quite a bit of missile pressure ready to go. 2 units of Bolt Throwers as well, most likely anticipating some Hell Cannon play. Supreme Sorcerer Fire with Fireball and Burning Head. Once again, nasty against Hell Cannons. Not really many targets for Fireball. Kolek has too much armor. Same with the Exalted Hero, as well as even the Sorcerers. There's just too much armor going around here, and too much missile resist. So honestly, Fireball becomes kind of meh against Chaos when you don't bring a Hell Cannon. But Burning Head, of course, still a major risk here to my infantry. But fortunately, not the most potent kit here against what I brought. Front line is mostly Dread Spears, as well as some Bleak Swords, so nothing to write home about. Certainly won't be winning any beauty contests, though they'll trade rather well with Marauders. 2 units of Dark Shards are in there as well to apply even more missile pressure because you don't want just too little of that. And here in the hills, we've got a War Hydra hidden, camping out in the tree line. And this monster, while perhaps not the most potent, can certainly lay the smackdown on my units here. It could potentially whittle down my infantry, if it gets a nice side shot, terror out them, that sort of thing. And you can see here this Marauder Horsemen here trying to push in, pressure off the Scourge Runners, are taking a beating. The Dark Shard Fire doing some damage, and of course they don't kill any models here. 80 armor, and that triple model setup means that they're just killing my models, while I'm not killing theirs. So fortunately, some over focus there. One thing you always got to be wary of with units that are pretty precise is that they do overkill sometimes. So that last volley, for example, only killed, I believe, a single horseman. Over in the meantime, Supreme Sorceress gets a bit cheeky and pays for it. Horsemaster's smacking her in the face with a volley there, but then forced to back off. Well, on the back lines here, you can see my horsemen sweeping around. And if we take a top-down look here, you can see we're getting a bit of an envelopment. We've got some horsemen sweeping around the flanks here, looking to get some shots in on the Hydra and the Scourge Runner. These horsemen here looking to get around into the back, while the Marauders are pushing forward. And the Dark Elves are pretty completely surrounded. That said, we have definitely taken the losing end of these early trades. Kolek already whittled down by about 1600 HP or so, and bleeding fast. Of course, Scourge Runner and Bolt Thrower Fire pouring in. We do compromise the Bolt Throwers, though. The Horsemen courageously diving in and dying for the cause here. Dying for the glory of the Chaos Gods. And it might seem like a rough trade. It definitely isn't ideal, but you know what? Killing these Bolt Throwers is important. If they keep firing, they will kill Kolek eventually, then focus out my Summoner's Rage, and I cannot afford that. Now, a Fireball is going in here, and we can see it does. I guess it does 500 damage, though. Some of that's missile pressure as well, so definitely hurting Fireball Kolek a bit, though not too badly. Not sure if that was overcast or not. In the meantime, those Summoners of Rage here able to push forward, while on the flanks we do have the Marauder Horsemen pursuing the Dark Riders here, keeping them pressured away, keeping their firepower off the field, and a nice Penumbral Pendulum here sweeps through the lines, wrecking these Dark Shards and routing them from the field, as well as helping break down these Bleak Swords. Mirror Guard, of course, doing some immense work there in the pits. And the Summoners of Rage, not ideal against Spears, not ideal against Dark Shard Fire, but they are doing their best here, and they are certainly applying some pressure my opponent's line as Murderous Prowess procs. Fortunately, one good thing here is that we actually routed off the Dark Shards before Murderous Prowess proc, because if we hadn't routed them before that, this would be another massive burst of damage output going into me. If you look at what Murderous does, it actually boosts AP missile damage, which is quite a boost. They'd probably have stuck around through that Penumbral if we hadn't killed them earlier, so definitely good there. Hydra, in the meantime, terrorizing the Chaos Marauders, so we're actually going to swing around the Shaggot, or the Dragon Ogres, trying to get them in the fight here, trying to have them beat down on the War Hydra, while some Javelins do pour in. And something to keep in mind is that the Hydra does not have particularly good leadership. Its leadership sits at a relatively poor 65, so if you're able to whittle that leadership down with some missile pressure, with some surrounds, it will actually buckle and rout pretty easily. That said, Scourge Runners and Bolt Throwers. The Bolt Throwers here actually got decrewed, and my opponent, I don't know if he realized it, is pulled them forward, so definitely a bit of a misplay. Does manage to recrew here, I believe, or trying to recrew. But is getting pressured back. So definitely a bit of a misplay here with the Reapers. They're just not able to get their shots in, and kind of missed opportunity to pressure the Summoners there. Anytime some Horsemen and troops rallying in the distance, and I'm not on top of bringing them back into the fight. That said, the Exalted Hero here, fighting in the pits against the Dread Spears. They're not going to do much against that 100 armor. He's pretty beefy against that, and he'll beat them down pretty well. He hits pretty hard. If you look here, 420 weapon strength against only 30 armor and 1900 HP, so knocking them down relatively quickly. Dark Shards, you're getting minced up by the Sorcerer, showing the power of having some heroes that can actually fight. Sorceress, unfortunately, does take off before I'm able to get on her, but Enfeebling Foe on these spears, while maybe seem wasteful, is kind of really one of my only options left at the moment. There aren't too many targets for it, and is going to allow me to break this unit a bit quicker. You can see another spell going down there. Fireball, most likely, from the Sorcerers, flying in against the Lord of the Storm. As he pops Foe Seeker, trying to get out of dodge, but takes that Fireball in the chin. Definitely not ideal. While the Horsemen continue pounding the Hydra. So the battle has kind of devolved into a bit of a messy scrap here in the middle. If we take, once again, another overarching view, you can see the Marauder Horsemen here won their fight with the Disgusting Dark Riders. A handful of them rallying in the peripheries here, coming back to the fray, chasing those troops off and giving us some pressure in the long run. My opponent running out of ammo or otherwise pressured off, so definitely a win against the Scourge Runners there. And this major brawl in the center here is definitely swinging in Chaos's favor. Kolek being able to be in here and lay the smackdown on some of these key targets is definitely helping. Summoners of Rage anchoring things. 12 models, while perhaps not with the best of stats, is definitely helping. We're actually able to get a bit of a pick here on the recrewing Bolt Thrower crew here, and trying to push them off, pressure them away from firing. Though the War Hydra is having none of it, and you can see we actually lost 3 models in seconds there, so some brutal damage. War Hydra, of course, 440 weapon strength, nothing to laugh about, and doing some massive work as arrows continue pouring in, javelins continue pouring in. And it's definitely quite the brawl. Kolek pops stand or die, keeping his troops in the fray as the Hydra's heals goes in. And this is where the Exalted Hero actually shines and shows his quality. An opportunity for the Exalted Hero to show his quality. Looking at those stats here, you can see, of course, 420 weapon strength and the rather monstrous 65 melee attack. That means he's hitting the Hydra almost every single time, and the Hydra with only 60 armor is actually getting chunked rather quickly, so we're able to pressure it back. Kolek comes in there swinging, Dragon Ogres on top of it, and it is routed. So big win there, removing that key terror-causing unit from the field, dropping a Chain Lightning here, trying to zap some of these Bleak Swords, and Kolek actually traps the Supreme Sorceress on the ground there and lands a meaty blow. 1000 HP left on the Lord of the Storm though, and definitely not ideal. Unlike that Hydra, he's not getting any heals, so he is on his last legs here for sure. We drop a lightning there on the Scourge Runners, just trying to do some damage and failing, and things are definitely not looking good for our friendly neighborhood Dragon Ogre there. That said, the battle is very much in our favor. Summoners of Rage here pursuing the Hydra to the map's edge as Scourge Runners vent their last bits of fire there upon them. And do keep in mind, these guys also do have missile resist. Summoners of Rage also, or all Dragon Ogres, I should say, get 25% missile resist, which is once again making them a bit tankier against those Scourge Runners. Since my opponent expended all of his ammo on the good old Kolek there, that does actually mean that these guys tanked rather well, and we're able to pressure this Hydra back. Unfortunately, there a bit of a slip up in micro on my part means that they don't pursue the Hydra. They disengage. Are going to take a bit of a charge here from the Scourge Runners. We countercharge. It's going to be a glorious brawl. Scourge Runners, of course, not really built to fight anti-armor, AP, Dragon Ogres in melee. One of the few units they will really not perform well against in a situation like this. The Hydra does dive in, though. It's going to lay us more of a smackdown. It's a full surround. Counter surround. Scourge Runners getting messed up. Keep in mind, my opponent still does have his Lord on the field, so some leadership is in there. The Penumbral Pendulum there does scythe through the enemy ranks, dishing out some hurt and routing these dark shards before they can fire too much. Leadership is holding steady these elite troops, keeping the troops, keeping themselves in the fray. Summoners of Rage slugging it out. It is a absolute brawl to the finish here. The Exalted Hero just really paying dividends, chopping down a Scourge Runner there with a single swipe of his axe. Actually, kind of a lazy slap if you look at it, but definitely cool. Dragon Ogres continue smacking down the Hydra, and it is going to be a win. You can see some Mirror Guard coming in the distance, and having this pocket of elites here in this late game scenario is definitely paying off. Sorcerer is able to come in there as well, come in swinging. Once again, 90 armor, solid combat stats. It is applying pressure, and that Hydra with Enfeebling Foe does rout from the field, granting a Pyrrhic victory to Chaos. So definitely a rough matchup for Chaos. It's not a matchup I would necessarily pick as Chaos. I don't know if it's... I definitely wouldn't rate it as one of the worst. Obviously, something like Vampire Ghost is much worse to play. But I definitely think, as a fairly inexperienced Chaos player, admittedly, that this is one of the worst Chaos matchups, and it's definitely a kind of difficult one, in my opinion. I do think the Marauder Horsemen are kind of necessary. You need to bring a lot of them just to screen and zone these units away. Scourge Runners, though, still, you cannot stop them. 1400 damage dealt, or value of dealt, 792 damage dealt on this unit here. Perhaps some of the shots were wasted on Marauders or whatever, I'm not entirely sure. But you can see they paid for themselves rather easily. I was not able to shut them down until the end game. Of course, they lost some models in those last brawls, but judging their performance by how much damage they did to the Summoners of Rage and Melee is not what we're here to do. Really, the rest of this Dark Elf army fell apart, and that's what enabled us to deal with the Scourge Runners. And I think if my opponent had gone with a more mobile build, perhaps, more Scourge Runners, not the static Dark Shards and Dark Riders, he might have very well been able to pick me apart with a more mobile build. That said, going over the other units here, the War Hydra did not perform up to snuff. It routed off some Marauders, and while that looked impressive early on, just routing entire units, those units were not all that valuable, and it wasn't able to handle the Dragon Ogres at all. See the Dragon Ogres there racked up 2,000 value, most of that against the Hydra, maybe some against the Scourge Runners later on. The Repeater Crossbows got zoned out. I think Repeaters are just not that good against Chaos, because Marauder Horsemen can fire on the move. Now, some of these units, of course, did not do well, but some of them did. Definitely paid for themselves. They're just able to pursue a unit like Dark Riders, continue throwing their javelins. You will lose if you stop the fight in melee. You cannot outshoot them because they will charge into melee with you, and if you try to run, they will run you down. So I think it's better to have, say, Scourge Runners, or at least bring some melee Dark Riders to protect you, because it just became an issue here where my Marauder Horsemen, I just sent a unit of Marauder Horsemen per Dark Rider, and they won out. Horsemasters did okay. They basically paid for themselves. Once again, not an ideal situation. There weren't perfect targets for them, but except maybe the Hydra, but they were pursuing those very annoying Scourge Runners, keeping them off the field, threatening the Sorceress, who still got pretty good value, 1,000 gold worth. Mostly chunking Kolek with Fireball. Definitely some work there. Kolek, not impressive. 1,200 gold worth. Not great for a Lord that costs, I believe, close to 2,500. Maybe with my kit it was a little bit less, but maybe like 2,200 or 2,300. But Kolek's definitely not performing great here. The Exalted Hero and the Sorcerer here also not necessarily doing the best. Definitely a lot of the work here done by the Mirror Guard. Some work done by the Marauders. Quite a bit by the Dragon Ogres, of course. And of course, you can't when the armies shatter, you can't expect your army to have every unit to have paid for itself necessarily. Some units were just routed completely off the field, like the Dark Riders were just removed. So a little hard to gauge there. But Sorcerer did rather well there, 1,200. A lot of good Penumbral Pendulums, good Enfeebling Foes, which are hard to measure. Did it work? For my opponent, definitely that Sorceress did well. I think not a huge fan of this cheap, chaffy front line. It kind of worked here with all the trash infantry. Maybe it would be better if my opponent had brought this sort of cheap, trashy build, but then infantry line, but then had a more mobile build revolving around it. Trying to hold the line for these Dark Shards just didn't work out. They got overwhelmed and ground under, and I think that was just a little unfortunate. Hydra there, though, definitely the biggest failure. Just got beaten up. I think more investment in the Scourges would definitely paid off. That's just my 2 cents there. Well played to the Wolfmeister there. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. As always, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.